And you'll have those, that will be different for every team potentially. And how will the team communicate outside of these times? Be careful as well that after hours communications don't become too stressful and exhausting. For example, sending emails late at night, but for some people might be really convenient, but just ensure that there's no expectation that there should be a response. And leaders must communicate often and transparently about the company updates, and so teams can focus on their work and they trust their leaders to keep them informed. And of course, increasing communication face-to-face as we're doing now, and absolutely turning on the video without excuses. Obviously we'll need reasons to turn off videos during the time when maybe kids come in or whatever it might be. But certainly our experience has been that it's very important to have that human face-to-face. And if in doubt, over-communicate. Misunderstandings love a vacuum, and so this is a time to work out loud, and that does not mean email. So this has definitely been more at a team level, but we need to consider how we work at a broader organisational level. So Steph, I'll hand over to you. What are the implications for how you manage and adapt your workforce in a time like this?
Thanks so much, Vic. Well, that's a huge question. I'll attempt to give it some good answers, I hope. So we really need to acknowledge that this is an unusual and really tricky time for our whole workforce. Every single employee is going to be facing something different in a new situation than they were a few weeks ago. And for our people managers as well, it's a whole nother set of considerations. But again, those managers are also employees as well, and we need to give them an opportunity to speak. So this is definitely not business as usual, and there's probably no limit on the amount of times that you're allowed to say unprecedented across this time. Now, where previously our workforce had consistent job activities, schedules and availabilities, now all the cards have just been thrown up in the air all at once. And it keeps changing. This presents a new set of risks to our organisations. So school closures and restrictions has impacted people's availabilities and capacity to do work, no question. People's schedules have changed with work from home and different personal responsibilities that they have during the day as well. And our business priorities have shifted almost in every single organisation, whether you're spiking or whether you're pivoting or whatever you're doing, the business priorities have shifted and they feel urgent. And in many cases, that's what we're asking of our people as well. We need to acknowledge that each of these three aspects has changed and will continue to be in flux. This is an entirely new way of working. And change is hard at the best of times. So providing guidelines and resources for people to communicate and flex their schedules is really important to minimise the business risk. Unfortunately, the reality is that for many organisations, we've also taken a huge hit to our revenues. The government's fiscal stimulus packages 1, 2 and 3 may relieve and hopefully have for you some financial stress. However, many organisations are still considering how to reduce their labour costs temporarily. There are many options before you need to consider redundancies, which are costly and also inhibit your growth when we move through this crisis. And best practices include a combination of unpaid leave, for instance, at Easter is a good time that many organisations are doing. Sporadic days off when there's no work anticipated on those days, and that will suit certain groups of your employees and not suit others. Buying additional annual leave, which spreads out the financial hit for your employees. And perhaps most significantly, temporarily moving to a 4 or even 3-day work week for the whole organisation. This is a really good option to reduce 20% or more of your labour costs while giving yourself a springboard for growth when the crisis finishes. And there is a playbook for that. There's ways that you can do that that retains employee engagement and has people sort of opting into the different sort of part-time or short work week models that suit them best. So finally, whichever measures you take, the team is no longer working the same hours on the same types of work in the same location. We need to provide our teams with the right tools and and resources to communicate and perform in this new work environment. But these are not just options that allow your business to perform and to survive. We also really need to consider what we need to do in order to comply in this new environment, which is way out of my comfort zone, but I'm really glad to know Deb, who has all the answers on this. So Deb, I'm going to have to turn it over to you for this one.
Answers, but I'll try and give you some guidance. We obviously, as a business, we've always specialised in compliance, and indeed before the pandemic began, there was an increasing focus on businesses moving towards acting with integrity and compliance, and we don't see that as needing to stop during this phase. Perhaps we just need to look at pivoting a little bit about what additional items we need to be considering when we're looking at staff working from home. As an employer, we are vicariously responsible for the actions of our staff, and we're required to comply with the legislative body that we have, regardless of where our staff are working from. So our duties to our staff to be able to be safe and to work in a safe and healthy work environment still applies, whether they're coming into the office or they're working from their home. So making sure that we've got the right policies and procedures and processes in place for our staff is critical. So as staff move to working from home, we need to make sure that their work environment is safe, both physically and mentally. So the obligation on companies to ensure that they're checking the work environment, to ensure that staff do have a safe place to work, that they are sitting correctly on a desk and not hunched over a bench, hurting their back. We want to make sure that domestically they're at a safe place to be on a daily basis. And we need to make sure that they're mentally well as they go through this crisis. A lot of staff and a lot of people are going to be having partners and people within their household losing jobs and losing income. So the stresses that places on families is enormous. So ensuring that when our workplace is presented to them in a remote environment, that we're providing them tools, tips, procedures and working environment that can help enhance their mental health, not add to stresses that they already may have. Training is a terrific tool for enabling staff to understand what they can and can't do in this environment and how to comply with your organisation's policies. In terms of take-up of online compliance training, prior to this was around about 14% of companies, which is very, very low. Now we don't have the option of face-to-face training. We really need to look to work into how we can impart our training messages in relation to compliance to our staff. And these extend well beyond workplace health and safety. When we're asking staff to work from home, they're often working from home PCs and home infrastructure. This means things like our company's confidential documents, our information and our intellectual property is potentially compromised. If you're having two people work from home who are actually employed by competing organisations, information just walking past the other person's screen and seeing information can potentially compromise information. So looking at how people are working, ensuring that policies are complied with to protect your company's intellectual and confidential information paramount during this time. It might just be that your messages and your procedures and your policies need to be tweaked a little bit to ensure that it accommodates a working from home arrangement. The other item is cybersecurity and privacy. Again, if we're utilising home devices, our ability to transplant information from the corporation across onto a home PC, and likewise have our home PC exposed to viruses and outside things and have them uploaded to a corporate network is incredibly heightened. So involving your CIO and your privacy officer involved in ensuring that your staff are working safely and protecting your customers' private information, your staff's private information, and the protection of your network is absolutely paramount. And lastly, when we're going to look at social media and bullying and harassment, in an online environment, we can still bully, we can still harass. And it's against the law, however it's done. So ensuring that the online chats and the online videos, the conduct that we expect in the workplace is no different from the conduct that we can expect of our staff in a remote environment. Having some sort of monitor on the way that we're conversing is really, really important. I think we're all familiar, and this is what I think to stress the points that Vic and Steph have made, is that ensuring that we're talking face to face and talking in life is much more reliable than emails, which sometimes lose tone and can sometimes be easily misread. And that sort of thing to a staff member who's already stressed can really be read the wrong way and create a framework for the potential for claims around bullying and harassment. So we need to make sure that what we're stressing to our staff was acceptable and unacceptable conduct, what do's and don'ts are, and that we're adjusting our policies and procedures and work practices to ensure that there is a safe and happy and healthy work environment for our staff to work within. And as always, with compliance in many aspects to ensuring that our workplace operates with integrity, the tone of your organisation is absolutely set from the top, from our leaders. In compliance speak, we say the tone at the top sets the mood in the middle, which creates the buzz at the bottom. And never has this been more important than we see in this massive shift we're moving for all our businesses. And I think, you know, when we start to look at leadership and how we impart culture through leadership, it's an interesting segue for me to move to the next topic of our conversation, which is about leadership and how leadership can make a difference. Beth, I'll move on to you to deal with this one.
Thanks, Deb. So absolutely, leadership is crucial right now, and we can expect managers to spend more time on people support and management than they would normally. So leaders will need to invest in relationships, and tuning into how the team is feeling each day will pay dividends. And some points for leaders are to acknowledge that this is a tricky time and be open, honest and human. So communicate with employees, I'm looking out for you. And also the important thing is to institute an open door policy for communication. Managers must make time available in their calendars for open hours or office hours, as they have been termed in the past, for their team to be able to reach out, or just be available in one way or another. And we know that that's really important when we're in the office. So we know that this is really important when we're working, probably more important when we're working virtually. They'll also need to encourage team members to create clear barriers between work and home life. And so this is really important when we're setting up our team, what you were mentioning before, Deb, around creating those areas where we can work really effectively, as well as when we're working, and then really delineate our home area. Role model as well, as a leader, it's really critical to role model good working habits to your team. And the important part about that is that we're ensuring that, that we're making it clear what is right behaviour and what is really wrong behaviour. And so that's critical to come from as someone senior in the organisation. We also strongly recommend moving to video-based communications, as I mentioned earlier. And this is a culture change and often really uncomfortable for people as well. But really, again, that critical from leading from the top to lean into this and turning on the video communications as often as possible is really important. And finally, giving trust to the team is paramount. So this is a really critical foundation for flexible work in general, because when you can't see people in the office, it often means that that leaders feel that people aren't necessarily doing the work that might be expected of them, but we often know that that's not necessarily the case. So giving that trust to the team will mean that they'll generally thrive when they're given this trust and responsibility and it's all put into their hands. So even greater client outcomes, team cohesiveness and productivity is absolutely possible if we take an intentional approach. And this is a time to make a strong start and show how to lead the way. So There is no doubt that leadership is paramount, great leadership is paramount right now. And there will be make or break moments for leaders. So if necessary, lean on resources to help develop your manager's capability. Of course, Safetrac has a number of courses available, and to support leaders in practical actions on how to lead working from home, you can check out our working from home courses that Beam and Safetrac have collaborated on, which is what obviously Deb had referred to earlier. So now that we've covered a lot in this session, Steph, do you want to summarise the key takeaways?
We've covered a lot of information, and top line, I know there's been some questions that have come through for more in-depth information, which we'll certainly follow up on. I wish we had time today, but perhaps if we just cover off what we think are the 5 most important next steps for most people, then we can move into questions. So 1, it's really important that, as Vic said a couple of times, you're intentional about your approach to this new work environment. Have a clear and consistent approach so all of your employees have the same information, options, and experience. 2, there's a lot of free information flying at us. And it's going to be quite overwhelming with the WhatsApp and the news feeds, and our email inbox seem to be inundated, but make sure that you adopt best practices and that they are the right fit for you and your particular organisation and workforce as well. 3, under a lot of stress, financially for our businesses and personally as well, it's easy to be reactive. So ensure you revisit your values and act with personal and professional integrity, and compliance is perhaps more important than ever. 4, online learning is a great way to make sure staff are acting appropriately and that all employees have access to learning and education, regardless of their schedules. So whether it's that tool or whatever other tool that you provide, make sure that everyone has sort of equal access and everyone's on the same page. And finally, 5, we need to acknowledge that the workplace has been flipped on its head and that our people need support with this huge amount of change that they're going through. We need to provide our employees and people managers with the resources and tools in order to maintain strong communications and business continuity. And I think I speak for Deb as well in saying that Deb and her team at Safetrac and Vic and I and our team at Beam, it's a bit of a tongue twister, are here to support you. So if you don't feel equipped for those steps, let us know, and we'll do whatever we can for you. So perhaps, Chris, if you want to turn to questions.
No problem. Thank you, team. So we have had a few questions come through, and I've got 2 here that we've had. The first one is probably best directed at you, Deb. It's a question that comes across. I facilitate and provide executive coaching to different corporate clients. Some of my clients are currently transitioning to online training, and I'm keen to hear your thoughts and expertise on how to best achieve this.
Good question. We're dealing with a lot of that question at the moment. I think I'll break that question into 2 parts. There's 2 aspects to online learning. One is the content and the other is the platform. When we're moving to transition training that was face-to-face into online learning, we need to be cognizant of both of those. There's a real propensity for people to think online learning is a video of a person presenting. We've found video presentations to be the single biggest turn-off for people actually learning, because they play the video and go and open their Outlook and do their other stuff while this sort of person's talking over in the background. It's not interactive and the person often turns off. So there are ways to present content in line with adult learning principles that ensures there is learner engagement and that they're actually interacting with the material to ensure that learning outcomes are achieved. So there's a lot to content and how to present it in an online environment that doesn't just mimic what you would do in a physical environment. And the second is platform. We have a lot of clients that have their own platforms and a lot of other clients that will rely upon our own platform. We do know that a lot of people's platforms are not working in the home environment well. They haven't been scaled for usage from all different IP addresses accessing the system. They've only been provisioned for utilisation of that item within the IP address of the network of the actual business. So there's some access issues that are going on with many companies. And then you've got the scalability of that tool so that it's enabled to work on sort of different bandwidths, because everybody's got different bandwidths in their home, and it's something that a lot of homes are struggling with. So ensuring it's got really good buffering and streaming and is hosted on a big and scalable server that's publicly available is really important. Certainly, if you've got specific questions, I'm more than happy to take them offline and talk to you about them. I think that will probably cover the question for now.
Brilliant, thank you, Deb. We've got one other question. This one probably best taken by the Beam team. So the question is, ladies, how can we get the balance right between flexibility and managing productivity when working from home?
Chris, I can take this one. Look, I think there are sort of three major categories of how employees will work when they're in a work from home environment. The first one is that you'll find a significant amount of productivity will go up. You'll have people who will literally not leave their workstation for sort of long periods of time because they're in the sort of home environment. And what that can do is not only lead to essentially burnout, but it can also lead to physical implications. We were speaking to some leaders recently. One had spoken about working 12 hours not moving for 12 hours because there was so much to do and just in meetings back to back on video. And as a result, the next day she couldn't necessarily walk. So, and she had some real, back issues and leg issues. So the recommendation there is obviously to be, you're not going to be at your peak productivity over that period of 12 hours. So there's a real need to sort of break it up into chunks of work, make sure that you're getting yourself up. And we even have people in our team that set timers, 2-hour timers, to ensure that they're kind of getting up and moving around. The second group is going to be those people who really flail in a work from home environment as well. So they need a bit more structure and sort of rigor around their day as well. For those people, they're going to need a bit more sort of a bit more of a framework to work towards, clear delineation of outcomes that are expected of them. And even just initially, more making that on a daily basis so that they can, and just helping break down their work and so that they can sort of ensure that they are being productive in this environment. And thirdly, there's those that just really settle into it quite well. And that might be many of the people on this call now, but there are people who just feel really comfortable working from home, can really easily achieve what they want to in that time, and do feel that they're more productive in this space as well. So really, I think it's important to sort of be able to cater for all those three different groups, because not everyone will be as productive as maybe people would anticipate, or unproductive as people would anticipate as well.
Wonderful. Thank you, Victoria, for the response. I've got another one that's actually just popped through, and I might just throw this one over to you, Deb. The question is around how can we ensure that, what can we do if the staff don't have adequate space at home to set up an ergonomic workstation?
Interesting. Well, quite personally, I cleaned out my junk room and turned it into my beautiful new study. That was my weekend task, but appreciate that not many people have a spare junk room to do that with. So this is a real and pressing issue. So in terms of working from home, as I mentioned, we still require, the workplace health and safety laws still apply to our staff, whether they're working from home or they're working from the office. And we're yet to get a ruling on by Safe Work in terms of what the obligation is on workplaces during this time for their staff's home environment. However, we do know that a workplace should be doing everything reasonable and necessary under the circumstances to ensure their staff are working from home. So, for instance, with an ergonomic setup, we can give them a checklist of what that ergonomic setup should be and have them report back to us if anything's wrong. So if somebody is slouched over a kitchen bench, what can we reasonably do to quickly and easily put them in a correct setup, which might be getting a few telephone books and raising their computer to a height that means that their arms are at right angles with their typing environment. So I think that it's about making do right now. The government has said that we can get tax deductions for any work from home equipment that staff need to procure in order to get them in a safe working environment. Or you as a workplace may give your staff an allowance to procure or purchase a standing desk or something to help ensure that they are ergonomically set up the correct way. We need to provide advice, guidance and materials to staff, and we need to be aware if something is unsafe in their environment, so we can try to do our best under the circumstances to manage those issues. So we need to look at our policies and procedures. We need to have a means of notifying us of incidents, injuries, hazards, etc. We need to have somebody appointed from your workplace that these sort of incidents can be, or items can be reported to. And we need to ensure that these are not just physical risks, but also mental issues, such as isolation, high or low job demands, reduced social support, fatigue, online harassment, and a really big one that we've started to address is family and domestic violence. So these are issues that your company needs to be aware of. They need to have policies about, and they need to have procedures about dealing with them. I hope that addresses your question to some extent, but my essentially really it's you've got to do the best you can do in the circumstances, and you've got to be shown to have done that.
That's great. Thank you, Deb. We've got a couple of questions around this one sort of topic, so I'm going to try and collate that into this one question for you, probably, Steph.
Yeah.
So the questions are around how do you manage the balance of under and over engagement? So how do you check in and ask, are you okay in smaller teams or perhaps overseas without seeming like being big brother or too controlling? So yeah, how do you manage that balance?
It's so true. You don't want to be the annoying micromanager that might just seem like you're checking in to make sure that people are doing work. And also that's really time consuming for you as a manager as well. So essentially, look, I think if you're thinking about you've got a team of managers who are managing people and you want to give them guidance, I think this is really about those strong manager capabilities, but on steroids. So it's being able to tailor your approach for different people. And I'm not talking about you've got your finance managers, they should be treated this way, salespeople, etc. I'm talking about there are generally a few, or probably 4 different types of communication styles. So you have people who will sort of, retreat back into themselves in this situation of high stress, or come out being quite aggressive or be passive aggressive, things like this, right, under stress. What we need to make sure is that as managers, we're having a really clear conversation to say, at the start, or even at a point in time, how are you feeling? How are you coping? What are you finding hard? What are you finding easier? Let's talk about what working rhythm and communication sort of rhythm is going to work for you. And then to sort of, gather those inputs from each member of the team, and then to come up with some new communication protocols. So for instance, if people are really missing that one-on-one time with you because you're completely absorbed in crisis meetings, then there's going to have to be a way to make that time and make yourself available for them. If they're really missing that team collaboration, then that's something that you don't need to participate in, for instance. you can, you know, get little groups together and give them the autonomy to set up their own video calls, for instance, and check in at particular points of the day. If you're talking about how do we make sure that they're working on the right things, then this is really about work prioritization and setting those outcomes and managing on outcomes, which is, as Vic sort of touched on as well, always important, but more so now than ever before. So, for instance, we use a tool, one of the tools that we have at Beam, the organisation design tools, which is a work prioritisation tool. And some of our community in the Beam network are using these on a weekly basis to reset on what are the things that we're prioritising this week, and to set really clear outcomes on that people can then, you know, report back. I don't know if I've gone off topic, sorry.
I think that's great, Steph. I think we've got a lot out of that one as well. And we are drawing close to our end time. So I'd like to just take this last opportunity to say thank you to Deborah, Victoria and Stephanie for presenting today. And to let everyone know as well, if you do have some follow-up questions, there were a couple there that we couldn't get to, unfortunately. So I'll send them around to our experts. And
Chris, can I jump in and just answer one other question that I don't think we've covered in this, and I think it's really important. It was from Lorraine, who asked about days off and how that can be managed. We haven't sort of addressed issues in relation to that, but certainly, you know, Fair Work has come out and looked at presenting staff with, and it being okay for organisations to come up with alternative work arrangements during COVID, so that our standard Fair Work obligations in relation to notice and reducing staff hours, that will be more flexibly applied. And we're seeing multiple workplaces get staff to buy additional annual leave and take more flexible arrangements this way. We're seeing staff cut hours and reduce people to part-time. Steph and Vic, you're an expert in sort of rearranging part-time roles in this environment, you know, and it's very applicable in this environment. In fact, we're currently working on a course on this particular topic. But do you have any sort of quick tips in relation to that exact question, which is, can you elaborate more on the sporadic days off, please? Is this annual leave by agreement or unpaid leave by agreement? And my answer would kind of be both. It could be either. It's up to your organisation. But what's your response to that? Sorry, Chris, to interrupt you. I just think it's a really important topic that's really valuable to people.
Yep, sure. So Deb, I think I sent a message through by text as well, and we can circulate that around if people need to jump off. But essentially, it's up to you. And we really recommend having a sort of menu of flexible work options that you're able to provide to your employees, and ones that you feel comfortable with. For instance, if you would like people to draw down on their annual leave balance, because it's obviously a liability for the business and you've got large annual leave balances sitting there, and that you can afford it at this particular point in terms of cash flow, with what we're going through, then, you know, that's a great option to provide to people. Otherwise, sort of saying taking unpaid leave at this point in time and reducing your hours is also an option. People might, you know, take that up if they have additional childcare responsibilities and so on. One of the really important things, though, when you're offering these different options is to make sure that people don't think that by moving down to, for instance, part-time temporarily, that this is a sign of less commitment to the business at this point. We've seen in the past a lot of biases towards people who are working part-time to say, well, obviously they're not as committed to the business, and obviously that's not true. It's about availabilities. So we just need to make sure that when we're putting these options out, that we're saying everyone's time is equally valued whenever and wherever they're working and however they're working, and it's about meeting those business outcomes and the objectives for that particular role.
And just to add to that, the other thing to note is if you are going to suggest reducing hours, especially across the team, that it should be indicated that it's a temporary reduction in hours as well, so that you're not triggering a redundancy or anything like that as well. So it's very important just mentioning that it's a temporary reduction in hours as opposed to permanent.
Great stuff. Thank you. Thanks very much, everybody. So we've got our contact details there. If you've got any more further questions, I've taken a capture of some of the other questions that have come through. But thank you again to your participation, Deborah, Steph, and Victoria. And
Thank you.
Thank you all for attending.
Thanks so much, Chris.
Fantastic.
Thanks for dialing in,
so much,
everyone.
everybody.
Thanks for having it. Bye.
Okay, bye.
Mm.